Thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to join us. And yeah, we're going to be getting things started. So yeah, welcome everyone to Conversational Collective. We're an open, inclusive community. We're exploring and learning and creating conversational technology. I'm your host, Matt Buck, and I'm glad that you've all decided to join us tonight. We really appreciate you spending time with us. And thanks especially to our international panel of guests tonight, some of whom have been gracious enough to either stay up late or get up early to be with us. So we have a panel discussion this evening, and we're going to be talking about building and testing natural language understanding with these fantastic folks, whom I will introduce, or ask to introduce themselves rather here in a moment. Before we get started, I do have just a few housekeeping items to cover. So first, big thank you to all the Convo Collective organizers, Brittany, Christy, our founder, Jessica, who founded this meetup back in 2017, Lauren and Meredith. Thanks again for helping to create another event. And thank you also to our sponsor, Voxable. If you're not familiar, I'm the co-founder along with Lauren and Brittany of Voxable. We're a conversation design platform. We help teams design, test, and refine their conversation designs. If you're interested in checking Voxable out, you can sign up for the beta at voxable.io. And please follow us on Twitter. We'll have some cool announcements related to tonight's topic coming up pretty soon. And if this is maybe your first time joining us and you're not a member yet, please make sure you sign up to officially join the Conversational Collective. You can do that at the bit.ly link below. When you sign up on our community forum, you'll get access to our Slack and our LinkedIn groups. Really helpful if you're looking for a new job in this space. We're posting job postings a lot, especially as more and more of those are coming around for conversation designers. If you're hiring or just want to learn what other members are reading and learning about conversational AI, it's a great spot. And filling out the community form will also automatically give you access to our Convo Collective newsletter, where we'll send you some non-spammy emails reminding you about all our events and links to other trending resources and news that's been hand curated by our organizers. Also, please follow us on Eventbrite, where we post all of our events. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the Zoom chat. I know we've got speakers coming to us from Austria, India. We've got someone that looks like from Sydney, Australia, Toronto. Hello there. A couple of folks from Toronto. That's excellent. Cool. So our agenda this evening, our panelists are going to have the floor for about 50 minutes. We do have some pre-selected questions from members of the audience. We'll also be selecting questions from the chat feed, so feel free to drop a question in there at any time. It's going to be a pretty free-flowing back and forth conversation. And now I'd like to hand it over to our speakers to introduce themselves, actually. And so I will remove the spotlight from myself here. And I will turn it over to Ragini, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, I'm Ragini. I work on conversational UX design for Wisdom AI. My work focuses extensively on delivering conversational AI solutions, right from the conversation experience design, which defines the interaction pathways and each user journey, to setting up machine learning models that facilitate and optimize natural language understanding. So my work covers the length and breadth of what goes into the system and what comes out of the system.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today. Kristen Sanford, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Sanford, and I work for 24/7 AI, excuse me, who they're located in Silicon Valley. And we also have headquarters up in Toronto. So hi, Toronto people. And I'm actually out of Boulder, Colorado. I work pretty exclusively for a financial client on an agile team where we work in a closely knit group with developers, with QA, ourselves as designers, with the product owners, the tech leads, and continually improving our digital and voice applications with this financial client. and looking at optimization, finding ways to increase those mitigation rates. We're looking at that all the time. And I dabble in the optimization across the board for the company with various other clients as well, digital and voice. And I have been working in the conversational design realm for several years with dating back to IVR applications and working with speech recognition, natural language, and as implemented in both voice chatbots and digital. So longtime user and designer. So, and I also manage my group of designers that work with this client that I mentioned. So I'm a manager and a designer, and they keep us on our toes. It's great. So thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much for being with us. And some of you might remember that Kristen's colleague, Celine Osieka, spoke to the group last month as well. And that was an awesome presentation.
Oh, cool. Yes.
And finally, Christoph Börner, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. I have to say good morning because I'm located in the heart of Europe in Vienna, Austria. It's now 11 minutes after 1 a.m. in the morning. So I'm full of coffee, but it's a pleasure to be part of this event. And I'm trying to bring in some QA perspective today. Yeah? So I'm already starting with being Captain Obvious here for one moment, telling you that conversational AI is software, and software needs to be tested. Yeah? And this is shortly what we are doing here. We are helping clients all over the world to deliver flawless bots by automating the testing and training on all channels, on all platforms. We became in the last 2 years with our open source framework, Botium Core, more or less the industry standard out there. I have hundreds of thousands of users of it, and therefore, yeah, I have some insights on the testing side. Of course, testing the NLP and NLU performance is very important, and yeah, therefore I will try to add this QA perspective whenever it's possible.
Excellent. I'm very excited to hear that and to discuss that with you. I definitely I share similar opinions about treating conversational software like any other kind of software, and testing is definitely a big part of that. Great. So before we get into the panel discussion, I do have just a few quick slides to run over to kind of give a really introductory background to natural language understanding, what that means. Meredith, do you mind sharing those final slides if that's cool? Wonderful. Excellent. Great. Yeah. So natural language understanding, for folks that aren't familiar with it, really just gives meaning to text and extracts structured data. So when we're building conversational interfaces, we're dealing with the text of what a user said, whether it's a voice interface or a chat interface. In the case of voice, we're going to have some speech to text system that's going to translate that into text for us. But when we have that text, that's just messy human language. And so machines can't really operate with that. So we need something that's actually going to turn that into, instead of just some text, some actual structured data. If you'll head to the next slide. Great. So what does NLU actually do? So if I was speaking with a conversational interface and I said, show me an event about conversational user interfaces happening on Zoom this evening, let's see what would happen if we passed that text through a natural language understanding system. If you'll advance to the next slide. Cool. So primarily, there's two things we're really interested in with natural language understanding. It's intent recognition. That's the first big thing. And intent recognition just means, what is it that this user is trying to do? So in this case, we know they're searching for an event. And then we also will want to extract some entities. So there's intent recognition and entity extraction. And entity extraction is where we're pulling some relevant data out of what the user said. So we can see that they've got this topic of CUIs, the location is Zoom, and the time is this evening. Cut to the next slide. Great. And so what we would be handed back most often is a hunk of JSON. So if you've worked in web development for any period of time, you're probably familiar with the JSON format. And so we can see here that this is actually data that's structured, that I can do something with. I can see, oh, I need to run an event search with this topic of CUIs, location being Zoom. And one cool thing that some natural language understanding systems will give you is context as well. So it understood the context of, today being May 19th. When I say this evening, I'm talking about 6 p.m. on this particular date, which is something I can actually pass to an event search API. Great, so that is the very, very basics of natural language understanding. And of course, we have a panel of experts here with us, so feel free to drop any questions in as they come up. I'm going to pull up the list of questions that folks submitted beforehand. One question that we got from the attendees is, should conversation designers own the NLU training, the NLP training data of their bots? I think this is a great question, and Ragini, I believe you said you'd start things off for us.
Yes. So I work on both ends. I manage the NLU and the conversation design aspect. So I can speak to this being important for at least the smaller implementation, in the sense if you're building a banking bot that can only do two things, opening an account and closing an account for you. It makes sense to have one person handle the length and breadth of the gamut of design aspects. But if you're thinking of creating a virtual assistant that takes care of 100 skills, then there is a lot of merit in having a UX designer, a conversational designer, and an NLU designer, each taking care of their separate aspects, but not working in silos, working together, right from the discovery, from user research to designing their individual aspects, and then syncing up constantly to make sure that everybody is on the same page. For example, as an intent designer, I might feel that 3 skills require 7 intents. And then how that flows into the interaction design is something I'll have to work together with the conversation designer on. So there are those multiple aspects, and I feel there's merit in both, but as conversation design is getting its own space, and there are more and more people coming in, I'm sure in a few years we have specialized roles for each of those aspects. So design teams will grow, and design teams will have specialized agents handling each of those aspects.
Yes, yeah, and I think that point about how, as in most things with conversational AI, conversational software especially, it's very much about working together. It's highly collaborative, and so I tend to agree. It's kind of less about sort of drawing lines around which one person or one team is going to be responsible for something, and more about how do we find a way to collaborate on this stuff effectively, because everyone is going to have, an opinion about it, especially, if in your example of the bank, you're going to have some marketing folks that are going to want to make sure we're keeping to the brand and tone guidelines, and, various stakeholders that are going to have input on how these systems behave. Christoph, do you have any opinions about who should own the NLU training data?
Yeah, it might not be a surprise, but I think also QA guys should be included here. Yeah? And I will give you an example why. So there are 2 extremely big challenges in all kind of test automation, no matter if you are automating now the mobile banking app of this bank Rajini was talking about, or if you automate their online banking website or whatever, or you automate their conversational AI. The 2 big challenges are always creating the tests and maintaining them. Now, this is what takes most of the efforts. And when it comes to conversational AI, test sets are usually kind of infinitely large, because bots often don't have any barriers. You often have completely open questions that users can ask, and so you end up with all kind of possibilities there. And actually from our community users that are sharing their incoming data, we see that people are really asking everything. Yeah? So the banking bots get questions like, what's the weather, and tell me a joke, and typically small talk and so on. Yeah? So test sets are pretty big, and therefore when it comes to NLP, NLU performance testing, the training data is for the QA guy an extremely good starting point. Now that the data science guys might think, oh, what's wrong with the QA guys? From a machine learning perspective, it's never a smart move to test based on your training data. But actually, to start with, it makes sense because first of all, you will get here in-depth insights how the NLP engine and your chatbot understanding are performing on the data it has been trained on. Yeah? And therefore, you will detect any flaws within the training data itself. They will show up in this way of testing based on the training data. And this is something you should never underestimate. Yeah? The importance of clean training data for your real life performance of your NLU out there. Yeah? So this is where you start. And just if we take, so most of our customers are somewhere between 100 and 500 intents, yeah, that they are covering in their training data. And then you have between 50 and 100 utterances behind every intent. Yeah, multiply these two numbers, and this is your first regression test set. Yeah, so if it's just 100 and 100, it's 10,000 possible conversations, and this is just the happy path, just the things you already expect. Yeah, and if, for example, what we are doing is in our tool set, we are just grabbing the training data. I don't know, let's say from your Watson Assistant skill or something. Based on this training data, we can immediately completely automate the test generation. So these big efforts of creating these thousands of tests are immediately gone. We run the tests and you get in-depth insights on the training data. Yeah? Therefore, I'm also saying that the testers should own it because they see then where are the performance problems, where should we tweak something, where are we missing training data, and so on. And with the right tooling, once again, for example, we are offering their automated test data generation based on paraphrasing and stuff like that. You could then just push back the newly generated training data to the model. Yeah? So therefore, QA guys should have access and should be also able to modify it. It's their daily work. And yeah, this is, as said, very, very good starting point. Of course, then the next step is to invest more time in proper test cases, testing also for the unexpected user behavior and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Again, it kind of gets to this same thing that it's. I heard a talk, I believe yesterday, about how conversational AI is a team sport, and so there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to want to have say on what happens to the training data. And this is a great point, that this is a great starting point for generating tests. And one thing that I'm sure we all know, anyone that's worked in these interfaces, is dealing with that kind of combinatorial explosion you referred to of dealing with these thousands and thousands of tests. Definitely makes testing difficult and more important. Yeah, and Kristen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, like, as far as testing, like, in my experience, the QA testers get involved a little further down the line. Initially, like in the example of the financial or the banking bot that Raghini talked about, is that you'd start with like your like a financial template for your natural language model. So we would already have like a set some set data points that we know are going to be banking type of intents, right? Especially, at least with voice applications, this is how we do it. And this is more, in my experience, is more working with voice. So we don't get as many of the random questions that you might get in the chatbots, like what's the weather? Those are all going to be filtered out or traded as no match, but we will handle all of the banking intents. And so we would start with those. As a designer, we would create kind of a high level flow based on our knowledge with the client, and write out lots of use cases to begin with, so that we know the types of questions that people are going to be asking the voice bot initially. And we then work pretty closely hand in hand with our data scientist, with the use cases that we've written, so that we also can kind of group the different intents together, the intents in the entity, so we know how to break it out and give more weight to different pieces of those fragments that we're going to get back from the natural language processor. So things like, that are going to be the most popular intents, like make a payment or transfer funds. Those are going to have a lot more weight than something that's a lot smaller intent that you're not going to have as many people calling about, obviously. So we work with the data scientists to figure out the different weightage that the different utterances really should carry. And we also review that pretty closely with the stakeholders and the clients, and even walking through to the point where we show the breakdown structurally, like how we would treat or and heavier weights and lighter weights, just so that I feel like the more familiar they are with how those intents are going to be broken out, the better. And then I would say we would upload a whole set of synthetic data initially. And I think that's like the type of data we talked about with the automated testing. You can do a lot of automated testing on that synthetic data. And your QA testers, once you actually put it together and make a release, are just going to hit on a few of those main different combinations that we want to test. Ultimately, I was also going to say that we will pretty much always build in time to do a post-implementation tuning, so that once we're capturing those real data utterances, I mean, really, I think that's where the magic lies, right? Once you find out what callers are actually saying, you can build in as much synthetic data ahead of time as you want to, but then just turning on some portion of your live code to some percentage of live callers and running a data utterance collection for a set amount of time, where you can then go through and transcribe and make sure that you're actually understanding all of the different types of requests that people are making, basically, so that there's not even an error with that transcription process between the natural language processor, that what we're seeing is the real data. So we go through and we collect the real data utterances, and then we will tune the model based on that. And that's usually like something like a couple of months after we've had our production release.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting observation here, that voice has fewer users that are going to be sending you these sort of unrelated questions. I kind of wonder what the underlying reason is there, if it's like harder to actually voice some of the nonsense that people will send chatbots versus typing it. Okay, yeah, wonderful. That was a great question to kick things off. So for the next question we got from the audience, I asked, what are some methods for providing transparency to clients on intent and entity structure? And so here I think it's kind of talking about, what are the assets we're going to be using to explain what can be a complex topic, to kind of explain what we mean by training data. If you heard that phrase, when you're training a natural language understanding system to recognize an intent, you need lots and lots of examples of, how might someone ask to do that thing. And so that's what we refer to when we're saying training data. That's how we build these machine learning models. And if you heard people mention that there are a couple times synthetic data or paraphrasing, that's one technique where you can say, okay, well, I've got this example of how a user might ask to see an event. There are various means of doing it, but there are types of AI I can say, hey, given this way to say something, paraphrase that for me. Give me 10, 15 more examples of how someone might say that, so I can actually use AI to generate data to then train AI, to train my natural language understanding system. So yeah, back to our question. What are methods for providing transparency to clients and stakeholders into intent and entity structure? And Ragini, I'll hand it over to you again to kick things off.
So I look at three aspects that I want to communicate right off the bat. One is how our intent is expressed. So that links back to the data, which is the master of all. Secondly, how our intents shape. So how are we dividing the intents into different classes? What sort of disambiguation methods are we using? And how are we leveraging the NLP techniques on the platform? And third is, how are your intents trained? So what sort of algorithms are you using, linear neural network, et cetera, et cetera. And to communicate that in a transparent manner, I usually end up building a matrix that acts as a master map of all my roles and skills, covering everything that's in scope for the solution and linking back to the intents that we'll be training. So let's say I'll go back to the banking solution example. If we have 100 skills, each of those skills will be outlined with a clear description on what each of that skill would cover, and then link that to an intent. And if there are entities, then that. And also defining whether that is in scope or out of scope for the project at the moment. And explaining how I'll be, what sort of a detection method would I be using? So will I have like a reject for something? Will I have an intent class for something? Am I going to use some sort of similarity matching for one particular aspect? If something like, what do you do? Do I want that covered as an intent or an FAQ? So that sort of understanding gets mapped out in this architecture document, which I think comes really handy when dealing with clients and larger teams, so that it makes just the process of a lot of people working on one solution easier, because we can all come back to this one document, which acts like the gospel truth. You're on mute.
You're still muted, Matt.
Yes, still muted.
We can try to do lip sync.
He's still muted.
Technical difficulties, 1 second.
I can speak to that question as well here. I was just going to say, as far as like working together with the stakeholders and the client and presenting kind of a high level flow so that they can just see all of the intents, from top to bottom. That's one place where we would start, is with a high level flow. We also spend a lot of time writing use cases, so they have some real world scenarios. Just try to make it, as kind of user friendly as possible for viewing and walking through use cases. Another method that we use is journey maps, which we find really helpful if we want to just show like kind of a typical happy path, and then something out of the ordinary. One thing that we had recently added was where we do some secondary levels of authentication, and so we send the user like a one-time PIN if they're on a mobile phone, and we wanted to show what that looked like from the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey in their call. And also, if there's any interaction in between, once they receive the one-time PIN, if they can click on a URL, be looking on a tablet or looking on their phone and opening a website, and in the journey map, stepping through that, maybe reviewing transactions or updating some piece of data, and then returning to the voice or whichever is the calling application from when you sent the one-time PIN, and just showing the continued journey. What happens if they're, don't respond for a long time after they've gotten that PIN? What happens after they enter the PIN? How much time elapses? What's a positive journey experience and what's a negative journey experience? And what might different user profiles look like going through that experience, through that experience? So journey maps, I think, are great as well, and help make it a realistic representation that they can relate to.
Awesome. And let's see. Christoph, there you are. I was making sure we didn't have everyone muted by accident. Anything else to add? We're still trying to get Matt to, he's troubleshooting right now. So I'm jumping in.
So I had just at 1:30 in the morning, my router got a new IP, so it was also gone for a few seconds. But Yeah, I would like once again to add here a bit the testing view when we're talking about yeah, informing your stakeholders, being transparent with your NLP status and so on. So from testing perspective, if we really bring it down to the point, we are doing quality assurance for two things. First of all, to end up with highest possible user satisfaction out there in production. Yeah. So and quality there is really derived from the satisfaction every user feels with every single conversation he has with the bot. This is one side. And the other side, and this goes now into the direction of answering the question here or the topic. The second thing why we are doing intensive testing and automation is to have confidence to ship stuff into production. Yeah, we all know in big projects we have heavy delivery pipelines. Yeah, we know that these big companies are deploying 10,000 times a day small chunks into production. Yeah, I have to be honest, I haven't seen a chatbot that is deployed 10,000 times a day. But nevertheless, yeah, our clients are deploying 100 times a sprint, yeah, meaning you have 100 production deployments, and therefore you need to bypass quality gates in every stage of your delivery pipeline. You need to bypass them in your whole bot development lifecycle, if we can call it like this. Yeah? And there exactly the answer comes also in. To bypass these quality gates, on the lowest level, it's a green or a red light. And if the NLP performance is bad, the light is red. Yeah, so this is what top management is usually interested in. And if we then go more into detail, of course, depending on who it is, a product owner, the business analysts, and so on might be more interested. Yeah? And testing can here really provide a lot of KPIs. Yeah, and if I just think about what we are showing there in our dashboard, this starts with simple intent confidence distributions, goes over incident entity risks, the same for deviation risks, utterance distributions, prediction statistics, yeah, like in F1 score, precision, recall, accuracy, mismatch probability risk. So this list is pretty long, and I read before in the chat we shouldn't go too technically, and therefore I'll try to step back a little bit, but there are so many KPIs, yeah, all around all the training data. I don't know, we are showing full similarity insights, even humanification insights, where we have a score that visualizes what happens if human flaws are happening. We are calling this humanification testing when we are injecting human flaws, and then typically stuff would be what is happening a lot in bots that are implementing a shopping cart or something. You can do stuff, or users out there are sending now lately a lot of emojis instead of text. Yeah? Instead of sending add a banana to my basket, they send just a banana emoji, and in best case the bot shouldn't fail. Yeah? Or there are these users hitting enter after every word, so the bot shouldn't lose the context, stuff like this. Yeah, this is then a humanification store, and then there is a term important score and insight. So there are a lot of KPIs that can be generated out of QA and NLP score testing, and it really depends on who of the stakeholders is looking at the data. Yeah? So usually, as mentioned, the top level management just wants to have the red or green light to ship or to not ship, and going down in this hierarchy, of course, people are more interested in the details.
Hello again, everyone. Sorry about that. Thanks to Meredith for jumping in there for me. By the way, if you're a Mac OS user and you have not yet updated to the latest major version, I would recommend that you not. it can really mess with your day. Great. So of course I missed the past few minutes. My apologies. Did anyone else feel like adding anything to the prior question? No? All right, excellent. I'll move on to another audience question here. So we got one: what is the most important thing for non-linguists to know about NLU when getting started? And so Ragini, as a linguist, I will send this one your way.
To me, I think what really helps is picking up basics of machine learning. I think we, as linguists, can probably understand semantics, syntax, etc. very well. So as somebody who's a non-linguist, these things might come naturally to English speakers or whatever language you're working with. But what goes into the system is pre-processed. And to understand what happens then, because the kind of training data you will prepare and what the machine will first see to learn from will be different. And to understand what that difference would be is very important. So doing some courses on basic machine learning practices or just reading articles online, there's so much material and so much great material present. I think that can be really helpful. You muted, Matt.
Thank you. That time I could unmute, thankfully. Kristen, is there anything you would like to add there for non-linguists to know about when they're just getting started, or really for anyone to know when they're just getting started in NLU? And Kristen, you're muted as well. Sorry.
I am muted. I am not a linguist by trade, so I entered into this field without really a background in it. So, you know, I think what's really cool about the machine learning is that just over time, these models, these natural language models, they do get smarter with the more data that you have and the more tuning that you do. And so you just, you will see that over time with, as you work on optimization and analysis of your bot, as the longer that it's running, the more data that you're collecting, the more users and different types of utterances that you're going to collect. And I was thinking again about that, you know, what's the weather example that you gave, Matt, and why we probably, you know, just filters those out of the voice bots where you have a specific bot like a financial or banking bot, you know, is because we're always listening, right? And there's lots of background noise for one thing. And so the bots are like honing in on listening for specific pieces of data. So we're listening for those intents that are going to match the defined intents that are in the model, which is different than like if you have like Alexa or Siri or just an open-ended natural language, you know, like a smart speaker that you're having a conversation with. So that's a little bit different when you have like a specific bot with a specific model that you're using. So I just wanted to explain that. I just was thinking about that. But yeah, I'm not a linguist, and you know, I think you can look at it from so many different perspectives. I mean, from the QA perspective and from the data science perspective and from the client's perspective. And sometimes it's good not to have, you know, you don't want to have like a pigeonholed perspective on anything because you have a better sense of, I think, you know, the user experience from all different places and how you want to apply that and build it into your flows. So that's just my experience. You're muted. Oh, I think, okay.
Oh,
Oh, okay, I'm back. Sorry, I really can't recommend enough. Do not upgrade. The one point I did want to add here. So one thing that we found ourselves telling people a lot about natural language understanding and kind of the state of where it is now. But just kind of something we want people to know about what it's like to build conversations with machines is that you aren't going to be having anything like human level conversation, which was kind of some marketing speak that I saw a few platforms using years ago, and just making that really clear, not only to stakeholders, but to users, that, you know, the more focused you can keep the domain, the better, and, you know, educate your users about that as well. Like, I can't have a conversation with you about what's happening, you know, in your day or about any topic, but I can help you if you want to check your bank balance. You know, I can help you with this really focused, limited set of things. We had a chance to see Bruce Ballantyne speak recently, who wrote a book that's really well known in the industry. It's better to be I can't remember the title of this book. It's better to be a good machine than a bad human, I think. Anyhow, he kind of made the point that, like, he referred to them as licks and riffs. Like, musicians learn riffs if you're learning the guitar, for example, and how he would like to see interfaces that kind of teach conversational riffs to their users. Like, you know, we can have these very short, well-defined conversations. Christoph, is there anything you would like to add there about what you think it's important for non-linguists to know about NLU when they're getting started?
Well, actually, I think the two ladies here are the experts and really covered the question. I think my knowledge there is not helping anymore.
Excellent, fair point. So, looking at our list of questions, and as I said, I've seen a few coming in the chat as well. So we've got one question here. Are you aware of any tools that are in the market right now for creating and managing your training data? And I can start here. There is one I ran across today, Human First AI, that kind of takes it looks like an interesting approach to the managing of NLU training data. I know Qbox.ai is another one that you can use to kind of get and track metrics on your NLU models over time, but also kind of transform them between, you know, different platform providers. So there's just a couple. Would anyone else like to add any they're aware of?
Yeah, so I've seen demos for Human First, and I think it's very cool for clustering data. And I think that's where it really shines. And when it comes to creating training data, I found crowdsourcing platforms to be very useful. So I've used a lot of Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is a platform where data collectors and data providers get connected, and you pay for every utterance that they generate. And it really helps give like a real life feel to the data you're getting. Because sometimes the automated tools would generate typical paraphrases, and we'll end up overtraining intents, which is entirely counterproductive. So what MTurk allows for is to create a scenario of the various intents that you want to cover, and workers on the other end will imagine themselves in that scenario and provide utterances based on that. So if they are chatting with, let's say, a real estate agent, what would they say when they want to purchase a house? So we give them a scenario of that sort. So we lead them in the right direction, but we don't give them too much information so that we get ambiguous utterances also. I found that to be very helpful.
Yes, yeah, that's an excellent tip on a technique there. Kristen.
Yeah, I was just going to add, so 24/7 does have a product that we have done some phased releases with, that's called the Engagement Cloud. And there are different parts of it. One piece being the modeling workbench, which is a way to help build and train natural language models with synthetic data, and has a testing interface where you can just use real speech. You can upload speech utterances. You can type in your speech samples, and automatically see, you know, kind of like at the beginning of this slideshow, how you showed the breakdown of, like, here's the intent and here's the entity, and this is going to be classified as X, Y, and Z. And so it's pretty cool. And we've worked with some clients with this particular self-service tool, the model workbench. We are still working on it, kind of just to make it more user-friendly and smarter. There is definitely a learning curve associated with using it. And so, but there have been plenty of real world examples where it would be super useful for clients to be able to use this tool if they quickly need to add another intent to an existing model that's in an application that's in production. You know, some promotional thing with their company related to the brand that is released, and they forgot to let the developers or the designers know, and so it's not part of the model. It's completely out of the realm of a banking model, and you know, it's happening that weekend, and we need to add it quickly. And if the clients could do this themselves with a self-service tool, it'd be amazing. And that's what we're working towards. I think we can get there. And there's, you know, just like I said, there's a little bit of learning curve with coming up to speed with using it, but we've done lots of practice with it. Writing new models from scratch is a lot harder, but working with existing models and just adding intents or adding utterances to intents, like if certain utterances just should be part of an existing intent and for some reason weren't included in the original model, you could add them that way, just uploading like with a CSV file. So that's what we're looking at, and that's a tool that 24/7 has.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And yeah, I think these kind of tools are really just starting to emerge to serve this market. That's, you know, we saw a space, obviously, that's why we created our own tool for the design phase. Yeah, and I think one point that's really important when you're talking about managing natural language understanding and a natural language understanding model and growing it over time, and this kind of gets into, you know, collaborating with other folks, is, okay, if I have a lot of people that all have access to this model and can make changes to it, well, as an engineer, that's, you know, that's a part of the code that determines how my software works. And so one thing that's really important in addition to testing is just version control, right? And so version control is just the fancy name engineers use for who made this change, what change did they make, and why did they make it? You know, I need to know all of the answer to all of those questions oftentimes. And I also need to know what was the state of the model at a particular point in time, so I can do, you know, various tricks for hunting bugs and where they got introduced into my code. And so that's one thing that we see is kind of lacking in tools that kind of get into really any kind of management of conversational data, but especially on the NLU side, being able to see, you know, who made this change, when was it made, why did they make it? Because with a lot of the tools, it's, you know, especially the kind of live collaboration tools, Lauren and I were talking about this week, you know, in certain use cases, live collaboration is just fancy chaos. All right, so let's see if we have, here's one question that kind of gets away from NLU, or no, actually, I want to start with this other one because I get this question a lot. What is there an optimal number of utterances or training phrases for an intent? This is a question that, as someone that's been in this space a lot, totally makes sense. And I have my own answer, I know, but I will turn this one over to Kristen actually to start things off. See if you have an opinion on optimal number of training phrases.
Oh goodness, I think the more the better. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if there is an optimal number. I guess it depends on, you know, the type of application and your audience and how many intents you're going that are going to be handled in the application too. I mean, if you're only going to have 5 intents, then you need a lot more data that's going to span across those as well. But if you have 150 intents, you know, maybe you can have subsets. Oh, I know what I was going to mention earlier also was that we find ourselves working with NL mini models in some cases too. And so that's where we have like a model within the model designed specifically for some module within the model, like payments or make a payment, where it's trained specifically for utterances and fragments that are going to match within that intent. And so then that's your mini model, and you'd have training data for that as well. But as far as optimal, I don't know that I have a good answer for that optimal number.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think that was a great answer, and that's something we saw as well. Like we were Dialogflow users back when it was API.ai when we kind of first started the company, and it's Dialogflow is kind of Google's natural language understanding platform. Used to be what powered the assistant, and with eventually Dialogflow, kind of this usage pattern emerged that you sort of referred to there with the many models. I think they call it like sub agents maybe in Dialogflow, but kind of creating those domain specific models to handle various features that your interface might support. Ragini, do you have any opinions on optimal number of training phrases?
Yeah, so if the platform that I'm using allows me to tweak the algorithms and then know what algorithm is being used to train the model, I'll base my decision on that. So as for me, the optimal number for linear algorithms, like passive aggressive classifier, would be 20 to 50. And if you're training on a neural network, because it's using word embeddings, etc., it will require a lot more training data. Then to kick it off, you need at least 50 to 100. But there are platforms like, say, Microsoft, where the algorithm is not exposed to me. So I've realized, and even Microsoft has documented this, that they want you to start off with 20 to 30 at least. So I'm assuming that they started off with a linear algorithm.
Yeah, and I want to compliment you for being brave enough to give a number to that answer. Not everyone. I'm not always willing to do that myself. So there is one more question I wanted to get to, and I think this might be a nice one since we're coming up on the end of the hour, maybe to finish things off. Does anyone have a simple but effective technique to improve a conversation with a bot? I have an answer I can start us off with that kind of relates to our topic today. Firstly, I would say design the experience you are going to build. Don't skip the design phase. It is even more important when you're talking about conversational interfaces, I feel like. As a developer who has gone out on my own and developed a few both visual and conversational interfaces without the guidance of a designer, you should not let your engineers do that. That is not what we are trained to do. We'll make the not the best decisions sometimes. So design and then test as well. So like we've talked about here today, conversational interfaces, they're just like mobile interfaces or visual interfaces in a lot of ways when it comes to the engineering. So you still need to follow those best practices. You're going to need version control. You need to know who's making changes and why. You need to be testing things. We need to have continuous integration. Be testing and deploying on a regular basis. So that's kind of 2 tips, but design and test. And then Christoph, would you like to go next?
Yes, so you took away the testing, of course, already, but no, to be serious, start with asking the questions like, what are our users expecting from our chatbot? Yeah, I've seen so many conversational AI projects where we came in, and usually people think about testing when they realize that the bot is not behaving like it should. And then we ask these questions: what do your user expect from your bot? And business has not really answers to that. Yeah? So this is where you start, and usually the outcome is, at least based on our research, first of all, they are expecting adequate answers, delivered quickly, and therefore you need a well-thought conversation model behind this. This is what you mentioned with the conversation design. In terms of testing, you have to test this delivery of adequate answers with testing your conversation flows and testing your NLU performance. There is no way around it. Yeah? And as we have had before, test sets are in theory infinitely large. There's also no way around automation. Yeah? I mean, of course, big IT consultants tell you, well, you have 100,000 tests, you do 100 builds a week, we just send you 400 test consultants and they will do it manually. Well, I think no one can afford to do this. Second thing is that comes always up when we're talking about user expectations is great user experience on all channels and platforms. Yeah. So typically it's the digital natives, it's the millennials, Generation Z, however you want to call these people who are using conversational AI permanently. Yeah. Starting in the morning, talking to their Alexa, then Siri is next, and so on. Yeah. And these people are expecting that your chatbot is working perfectly on your company website, as well as in the mobile app, as well as on the Facebook Messenger, in the WhatsApp client, and also as an Alexa skill. Yeah? So they don't care about the technologies, the front ends, and so on behind. They are expecting excellence everywhere. So test end to end on all channels. Yeah? This is important. Third thing is, and those are just four. Third thing is performance. Yeah, so users are expecting to get answers immediately. They don't care if it is halftime, Super Bowl weekend. Yeah, they are not waiting there for 10 seconds to get an answer. And the fourth thing is obvious. Also, state-of-the-art security and data privacy should be in place. Yeah? And for all these four things, there are test types out there. Yeah? As I mentioned, conversation flow testing, NLP score testing, end-to-end testing on all channels. And this means also testing voice-based, for example, testing IVR systems if you have them still in place. For performance, you can do stress and load testing. Yeah? For security, you can do security testing. And this, there I'm just coming back with my entry statement, more or less. Chatbots are software. For software, we know since many years there are minimum quality standards we have to fulfill. There are various test types. So test your bot, and this will immediately boost your conversations. This makes an enormous difference.
That's a great point. Design and test if you leave with anything here today. I see we've hit the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you again so much for our speakers. Ragini, Kristen, Christoph, for taking the time to be with us here today. Really appreciated it. Some great insights.
Thank you guys for having me.
And thanks again for joining us. And we will see you all again next month. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.